Welcome, everyone. Thanks for signing in today and joining us for the June Brain Jam. I had to check right there what month it was because that's how time works these days. I have a bit of a warm up for us so that any just a few minutes latecomers can come in without missing anything except for this fun warm up that I'm excited to try out. So here is what we're going to do. I'm going to put up in a moment an image on the screen. It's a collage of images, and I just want you to pick an image that speaks to your relationship to emergent facilitation. Okay, so let's try it out. So let's do this. Here are, I'm going to spotlight myself so you don't have to strain so much. Okay, so here is a few images to pick from, and I want you to pick an image that speaks to your relationship to emergent facilitation. Don't think too hard. First thought, best thought. And if you are up for sharing either in the chat or out loud, just come off of mute, unmute, and tell us what you picked and why. Anyone game?
I'll go.
Go, Kate, and then Susie.
Sorry. So I picked the skydiver thing, I think, hang glider, sky, whatever that is, because jumping off into the unknown, that's what came to mind.
Nice. Awesome. Zuzka, did you pick the same or a different image?
Picked the image with the window with the ivy around it, or some kind of plant life. And I think it's because my relationship with the word emergent comes from like the systems thinking arena, where people think about things kind of emerging in different systems, social systems, but basically a lot of that thinking came out of biology, right? And seeing how systems emerge in biology.
Got you. Beautiful. Maya, I see you. Yeah.
Yes. So I picked the books because I feel like I'm just trying to research everything I can on this topic.
Okay, beautiful. And we have one more. Robin, yeah.
I picked the cat with the tutu because I find that I'm always trying to talk about having emergent processes with folks who aren't quite sure what that means or looks like or how to get a handle on it. And so I often have to look a little silly and act really confident about it to get to get there in talking about emergent processes at all.
Beautiful. Awesome. All right. Anyone else? The question on the table for those who are like, what is happening right now with these images? We're picking an image that speaks to your relationship to emergent facilitation. Yeah, Marcy.
I picked the tunnel, the dark tunnel, because it's another one of like, where am I going? Oh, I don't know where I'm headed.
Okay. Awesome. All right. If you want to share but didn't get a chance to, please put it in the chat so that we can reflect on your thoughts as well. I am going to remove my spotlight here and become back to being me. All right. Welcome, everyone, to the June Brain Jam. My name is Meg Bolger, for those who do not know me. And I am, steering the ship here at Facilitator Cards, and I am really excited to get into emergent facilitation with you because that is really how Facilitator Cards got started. It is like part of our origin story, and so I'm really excited to talk about that, which we will get into in a moment. Just a little bit of framing for those who have not necessarily been to a Brain Jam before. Brain Jams are Facilitator Card community events. We do them the first Wednesday of every month at this time at 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, and 8 p.m. for our folks over in the UK and in Europe. We explore a new tool, technique, or technology. I would say emergent facilitation is perhaps all three of those. And we're going to kind of incorporate different techniques and technologies throughout our session today. And we do brain jams in a 60-60 format. What I mean by that is basically the first hour, we ask everybody to be here for the first hour, and we really kind of dive in, explore the topic, try to get our hands into it. And then the second hour is for people who want to keep asking questions, keep exploring, and also who want to experiment. Like if you're like, I want to try something out, with a bunch of like willing participants who are going to be like really gracious, or give you really good feedback, one of the two. And that's what that second hour is for, is like kind of for active experimentation. So if you can stick around for the second hour, it's often a really fun and entirely emergent time, as always. So today we're talking about emergent facilitation. I went and looked up what that word meant, and there are two definitions: arising unexpectedly. So I would say those are the category of facilitation when things are not going well and you expected them to go well. That's one version of emergent facilitation. I loved the second part of this definition, which is calling for prompt action, which is kind of when you expect or need to go in without a plan, when you're like, I can't plan because of a bunch of different scenarios that could happen. Either like your contact does not have a good read on the group. You don't know who the group will be. Like there's too many unknowns, so you have to go in ready for that. Often what is really needed is for us to have prompt action in those moments. And I kind of see emergent facilitation as building the road you're driving on as you drive down it. And that's where the prompt action is really important, because if your car gets ahead of the road, bad things can happen. Or at least it gets real bumpy, which is what it often feels like. So today's flow, we are going to prepare for doing some emergent facilitation. Prep, I think, is actually like an underrated part of emergent facilitation. So that's where we are going to start. And then we are going to build, we're going to do some like planning scenarios basically with emergent facilitation. We'll debrief those, and if we have time at the end, we'll do a little bit of chatting. That's all going to be hour one. Hour two, like I said, deeper dives, Q&A, and experimentation. Something to note about hour two, you don't have to stick around the whole time. It's just up to a second hour. So wonderful. All right, before we go any further, any questions? Any questions? Okay, wonderful. All right, quick story time then. So I am going to, for those who don't know it, I am going to tell you the origins of Facilitator Cards. So let's see if I can do this in about 2 minutes. So Facilitator Cards started because me and my co-facilitator, collaborator at the time, Sam Killerman, were incredibly ill-prepared for a workshop. Basically, we had been doing a bunch of Train the Trainers for years, and we were heading in to do another Train the Trainer with a group. And about 2 weeks before the event, we realized these people don't need a standard Train the Trainer. They need something entirely different, and we have no idea what they need. And so we realized that we were going to have to build the curriculum as we went. We were going to have to walk into that room having no idea what the group needed to focus on for the next 2 days, figure out what they needed to focus on, identify, like narrow that scope, and then figure out how to give them that over the next 2 days. So because it was on facilitation, we felt pretty prepared to like dive into that topic, but we literally had no idea where to go with it. And so what we did to prepare is we wrote down every process that we knew how to facilitate. We were like, pair shares, mind maps, pro-con lists. Like we wrote all of these things down on index cards. We went in with our index cards, we went in with our list of supplies, and then we went for it. And for 2 days, we built the curriculum 90 minutes at a time. Basically, we were working to get to the break. We were like, okay, we just need to get to the break. And then we would like run to the back room and be like, what can we do? And then we would do another 90 minutes, and then we would get to lunch break. And that was like an hour, which was luxurious. And then we would do another 2 90-minute sections. And that's how we got through the 2 days. If you're wondering, no, they didn't know we were doing that. And yes, it worked out. And not only did it work out then, we told them, by the way, later, that that's what happened. They were like, it was great. We loved it. And we didn't do it on purpose. In that moment, we had no other choice. But going back, I think it was the best thing to do for that group. I just would have gone into it intentionally. So why I say that's the origin of facilitator cards is because those index cards ended up being these things. So a couple of years later, we turned those index cards into a proper tool, and they are my absolutely most used facilitation tool in general, but particularly for emergent facilitation, I really think they take something from being this like really scary beast to something much more manageable. And so that's where I really wanted to focus on using facilitator cards to do emergent facilitation today. So that's the origin story and the framing story. And we are going to use that example throughout the workshop today. So basically, a lot of the brain jam today is going to be putting you in a much lower stakes version of that scenario and having you figure out how to work through it. So that's kind of the framing for the workshop today. We're going to start by getting ourselves prepared to do that. And by starting where I think it's really important to start with emergent facilitation, which is figuring out what supplies we have at our disposal. So when we were in person for that event, we had index cards. I called them BAPs, big ass Post-its, like sticky flip chart paper. That's what I call BAPs. We had markers, we had pens, we had all of that kind of stuff. I don't know if we had Play-Doh, we might have, but those were our supplies. And so that was kind of like the limits of what we could use for our session. I want to briefly make a list with you of like, what are the supplies that we have in this Zoom, essentially. In this Zoom, what are the supplies that you have the ability to use? And obviously, these are going to be more like, what are the functions of the Zoom, rather than like supplies. You might have to think of them a little bit differently, but I just want to make a list together of like, what are our online supplies that we can use in this Zoom room. And what I'd love is if you could just unmute and shout them out, or put them in the chat. It'll be a little more exciting if you shout them out loud, but it's totally good game to put them in the chat. So I see reaction buttons. Oh, goodness. All right, reaction buttons. We've got voices. We've got chat. Okay, Robin, I see that you have a specific tool, Climber Cards, which we could totally get into. I'm going to say, like, I want to limit, because there's a million online tools like Mural and AHA Slides and all that stuff. I want to say, like, just using the functions of Zoom, what could we do? I know that screen sharing means that you can do really cool things with other platforms, but like just that.
Filters
okay.
and backgrounds.
Filters and backgrounds. Would somebody be up for reading the chat out so that I can type, and just to get another voice in the room, because that way I don't have to be the only one talking?
Yeah, breakout rooms, whiteboard is in the chat.
Yep.
Annotate is in the chat. Sorry, I'm going like back up.
Yep.
And I think you've got them from there.
Okay.
But 2 people said breakout rooms, just so you know.
Right. An important one. Crucial.
Yeah. Visual voting, thumbs up, down voting.
Visual voting. Yes. Beautiful. Okay. Anything on this list that we are missing?
Even just the like camera on and off feature.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
What about the go fast, go slow, green check mark, the blue thumbs up? There, it's usually like on the right-hand side of the Zoom and underneath the participant list.
Yeah, I'm going to put that like reaction/responses.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. And I heard another voice there.
I put in spotlighting.
Spotlighting. Beautiful. Okay.
Changing your name.
Changing your name. Yes, that is an underrated and I think very underused tool. If somebody said that, would you mind sharing how you've used that as a tool?
Yes. So typically, if I need to like really make sure that we are checking in on like how people are feeling, or like what's the like a really quick touch point before if we've got a lot of content and really need to get into that content for a meeting, but we still really want to make sure that there's a touch point, then having some kind of a question, change your name to fit the answer to this question, and then that kind of like sits as the name for the whole meeting.
Awesome. Great.
Also, it's really helpful to use if you have breakout rooms and you want them to stay consistent, because it saves you a ton of time if you have everybody put room 1, room 2, so that you can like, because otherwise, if you're working with 50, if you're facilitating a 50 session and you have 10 breakout groups, it can take you longer to sift everyone and go in alphabetical order and all this stuff. So sometimes it can be a really helpful mechanism for supporting the use of other tools.
Yes, absolutely. I saw you and Marcy were on that same wavelength. Okay, awesome. I'm going to stop our list because we've got quite a few here now and probably more than enough to work with. Views. I'm just going to call it views. Yes, Erica, that piece is really important, the helping you group people. And you can actually do kind of a combo of what Andrew and Erica said, where people can't send you a chat when they're in the breakout room, but they can change their name. So if you wanted to do a quick thing, like throw a question out to the rooms and have people change their name in the breakout rooms, you could actually see it. So like there's a meeting of those minds as a creative tool. Okay. Oh yeah, there's a follow host function, right? So that's kind of, I would say that's a view as well, where you can set the participants up in a particular way. Whoa, I did something weird. There we go. Okay. All right, so these are our supplies today. These are all of the functions that we have at our disposal. The other thing I would say is safe to assume is just that people can access paper and a pen, either a Word document or a notes. Even if they're calling in on their phone, like opening notes is really easy, or most people have paper and pen around them. So that's the only like physical supply that I think is pretty safe to assume people have access to. I wanted to do a really quick demo in case anybody has never seen the whiteboard / annotation feature, just because I haven't actually been in a workshop where people have used that. So we're going to do like the world's quickest demo of this. So let's see how actually quick it can be. All right. I'm about to share a whiteboard, and then I'm just going to enable annotation for you. So you should now see a little, like there should be a little way for you in the options, in the view options. If you click on that and then find annotation in the menu, you can, annotate, draw a picture, put your name in there, put a text, tell us where you're calling in from, wherever you want. I just want you to see how fast this is to do. And obviously this is a whiteboard. We're using this as a completely blank template. You could also set something up ahead of time and have people use all of these exact same features, drawing, stamping, using text. They could do all of that on top of a Google slide or on top of something else, but we were going to limit it to just this. The other thing is I could set this up really briefly when you were there and then enable annotation afterward. Okay, I'm going to save this because we never want to lose the art, and I'm going to stop sharing. Okay, bringing us back. All right, so that was the annotation feature on a whiteboard, which is really cool. You can do it in the main room. You can also do it in breakout rooms. So those are our supplies today. So that's step one when you are virtually facilitating. Know what supplies you have, or not virtually facilitating, emergently facilitating in virtual space. Know what supplies you have. And the second piece is if you hit clear and you're not the host, it only clears your content. Yes, it does. The second thing we're going to do to prepare for throwing you into a scenario is we're going to figure out what processes we know. Much like me and Sam did in that workshop, we are going to identify like what are the processes we know how to do with groups. The way we're going to do that is you're going to pull out your facilitator cards. So that's step one. Pull out your deck. Maybe we can do a quick, here it is. Yes, yes. Excellent, so beautiful. Okay, wonderful. So open your deck. Step two. All right, step two, open your deck. What I want you to do, and I'm going to give you no more than 5 minutes to do this. Okay, so it's going to be pretty quick. Is I want you to make 2 piles. If you were in the last Card Shark session, this is going to feel familiar with a little bit of a twist. So we're going to make 2 piles with our Facilitator cards. We are going to make a pile of cards we know how to do. Not like, oh, I have to read the back of this and like, oh, maybe I could figure out how to do it. But just like, you look at the title and you're like, yep, I know how to do that. Cards we know how to do, cards we don't know how to do. Okay? When you get 3 or 4 cards in the same color, move to the next color. Okay, so if you got 3 or 4 blue ones, move to green, etc. And I'm just going to give you 5 minutes, and you want to come up with 12 to 16 would be awesome, but if you only know 8 or 6, that's totally fine, but no more than 16 cards that you know how to facilitate. Okay. All right. So we're going to do a really quick poll. In a moment, I am going to I always say throw you into breakout rooms, and then it feels like really aggressive. I am going to place you gently into breakout rooms in a moment. And what I want to know, and what you're going to do in those breakout rooms, is you are going to work through a sample scenario with your cards. Okay, so here's my question for you. Do you want to do that in co-facilitator pairs, which is probably most realistic to real life, for me anyway, or in triads? So finger vote, 2 for pairs, 3 for triads. What would you rather do? Oh man, it's like really evenly split. Okay.
All right. What are we doing? I'm sorry. Can you just
So
clarify?
you're voting for whether you want to work with 1 person or 2 people.
But what's the
so
work that we're doing?
pairs, triads. And you're just telling me with your fingers, 2 or 3. But what I've kind of got a sense of the group, and it's really evenly split.
Hey Meg, what if we put it in our names, and then you could put us in breakout rooms by the number of people we want to be with?
It won't work perfectly, but let's do it. Okay, so everyone change your name to and put a 2 if you want to work in pairs, and put a 3 if you want to work in a triad. And I will manually assign your groups, and we'll see how perfectly it works out. If you need help renaming yourself, you just find the 3 dots in the top right corner of your window, your little camera, and then there's an option for rename. You could also just text me in the chat. That would also work. Okay, let's see if I did enough rooms. Okay, oh my gosh, y'all, this is one of those like believe it moments. It worked 100% perfectly. Okay, so here's what's about to happen. You're going to have 10 minutes, a little over 10 minutes with your group, and you're going to answer this question. What cards from your mini deck could you use to figure out what are the needs of your group? So going back to that scenario that me and Sam walked into that first day, and we were like, okay, what do you all need from us? Like, what do you need to learn or unpack or talk about? Like, what are the needs of this group? That's what you have, roughly 10 minutes to figure out. I want you to use only the cards that you've already identified that you know, which obviously like Zeus could know a card that Kate doesn't, and that's totally fine, right? But working together as a team, I want you to come up with 1 or 2 cards or a process that you could use to help identify what are the needs of this group that we're working with. Okay? Any questions about those directions?
Can I ask, is it
Putting
an
it
activity
in the chat just for reference? Okay, and in case you're like, I need a little more clarity, Meg, like, are we on Zoom? Are we in person? We're on Zoom. It's a group of 8 people. Okay, and we have all those supplies that we already talked about. Go ahead, Zuzka.
And the activity that we're doing is not an activity we're doing with our co-facilitator.
I cannot hear you.
Oh.
Can other people hear Zuzka? Cool. So my computer is like not working now. Awesome. Okay. Just get and this happened last time. Okay. Zuzka, could you put your question in the chat for a second? Because once I put you all in breakout rooms, then I can fix this error without it slowing us down. Okay. Is there an activity we should choose one that we could do with our co-facilitator? No, we're not going to have time to actually do the activity. So this is just like thinking through what you would do, right? Okay. All right. I'm going to send you off to breakout rooms. Please call for help if you need it. And I'll give you a time check when we have 3 or 4 minutes left. But otherwise, good luck, emergent facilitators. We will hear back from you in about 10 minutes. Welcome back, everyone. All right. Appreciate that if you went right up to time, I probably cut you off. And if you're like, I need to finish that thought, like you can finish it in the chat and we won't know what you're saying, but your group will. And that is like a fun inside moment. So if you want to do that, please do. I would love to hear some of what you came up with. So if your group identified, like we actually came up with 1 or 2 cards we really like to answer this question of how do we get this group to tell us and help us identify their needs. If you're up for sharing out loud, will you raise your hand? It could be a digital hand or your physical hand, so that we could hear from you. And if you're like, oh, I want to share out loud, but I'll share in the chat, you could totally share in the chat, but I'd love to hear at least 1 or 2 out loud if folks were up for sharing for their group. Yes, Robin.
So Sylvia and I, we chose 4 cards in a row. So,
Right.
Start with like an I know and I wonder list on an annotate screen. And then go into a paired share, which is just a quick little check-in, like how are you and why are you here? So you will have shared, and it's I know and I wonder about facilitation. So like I know this about facilitation and I'm wondering this about. And then paired share breakouts, how are you and why are you here? And then do a sticky note generator in the chat. So do ask folks for breakout room topics and questions. And then if we need to, we can choose those by banishing options, or we could just put them all and let people choose a breakout room to go to. Done.
All right. That was awesome. You wrote like probably an hour to 90 minutes. I don't know how long you think that would take, like of curriculum in 10 minutes. So I think that was pretty awesome. So we've got, I know I wonder, I don't know if it's going to work. Yep. I know I wonder, followed by pair share, followed by sticky note generator, followed by vanishing options. Okay. Beautiful. Okay. Quick digital round of applause for Sylvia and Robin. Yay. Okay, Marcy, tell us what you all came up with.
I just, in particular, want to thank my partner, Jennifer, because I had brought with me to the meeting the silent reflection card is one I was familiar with. But when you gave us the task about how to find things out from the people in our group, I eliminated it.
Yeah.
And Jennifer pointed out to me, made it very clear, it was quick, and suddenly like light bulb over my head. Give them time to reflect, use silent reflection before you do the pair and the share, before you do the sticky note generator, any of the others that we might have chosen. And we had several. So I appreciated being reminded that the silent reflection should also be, and can also be used when you're trying to figure out what a group needs.
Yeah. Yeah, I think silent reflection, Jennifer, I'm wondering if you actually want to speak to this rather than me try to think what you were thinking. Like, why do you find that one so powerful, or why were you drawn to that one?
Yeah, to me, I think we're always asking people to do things with the assumption that they have that at the top of their mind. And just having a moment to process something, whether it's before a meeting or even during a meeting, before I give a response that I've had the opportunity. And again, if you have introverts in the room, having everybody have that time for silent reflection is great for the introvert to say, like, or anybody, I shouldn't say introvert, but anybody that just wants that extra time to process before sharing, either out loud or in writing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Love it.
Meg, I also had the silent reflection as the one that I would start with. And I think the reason why I thought of it was because you kind of avoid that group think, right? You want to keep your discussion as broad as possible in the beginning. And so rather than having the first person say something and then everyone goes down that thought process, starting with the silent reflection allows you for the broadest starting place to then refine.
Yeah, beautiful. So I want to do one more scenario, and basically this idea of figuring out what the group needs. Robin and Sylvia a little went down this path with the vanishing options, but figuring out what the group needs, this actually happened for us, right? In this scenario, we were like, tell us what you need. And we did sticky note generator and had a bunch of stickies on the wall. And then we have like 15 things, and we're like, only a few of those can we actually get to, and only one of those can we do next. So here is the question that I want to throw out to the group, and maybe we can channel what we're talking about right now and do a little bit of silent reflection, give you like 2 minutes to think through this, and then just chat as a large group. So let's say you did sticky note generator. Maybe you started with silent reflection, you had people write sticky notes so that you avoided that group think, and then you had them put up all of their wants on the wall. What could you do to identify priorities? What process could you do to identify priorities? And if you're like, okay, that one's pretty obvious to me, then the next part of the question is, and how would you pick where to start? Okay, so I'm going to give you 2 minutes, fastest challenge, to find one card that you could use to help you identify what their priorities were. I will encourage you towards the red cards. I think that's where you probably want to be at. And so pick one card, and then how would you decide where to go first? Those are my 2-part question, and I'm going to give you 2 minutes to think. And if you're like, I can't do all of that in 2 minutes, don't worry. We have the group, the collective wisdom here, and we'll figure it out after those 2 minutes. So 2 minutes silent reflection, and then we will come back.
Could you say the question one more time, Meg? I'm so sorry.
Yes. No, the question is, how would you get the group to prioritize or identify what is important, and narrow the scope of possibilities? And then how would you pick where to start? Gonna have you wrap up your thinking. It's okay if you only got through one question. And what I'd like to do is hold the card that you picked up to the camera. I love us. We're like getting oriented towards the camera. Okay. Yes. Cool. We got a bunch of different ones. Okay. We've got heads down, hands up, rank order voting, urgent, important, dot voting, finger voting, rank order voting. Okay. Amazing. Okay. Thank you for playing with me on that one. Okay. So a lot of different possibilities, which is awesome. I was like, is everyone going to pick dot voting? And the answer was no, not everybody was going to pick dot voting. So very cool. Did anybody have a thought on how they would pick where to start? Especially someone who, oh yeah, Bryn, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's part of what appealed to me about the urgent versus important grid, because I think you get like a little more of that, like a little more dimension to that question of like, where should we start than just like, the most interesting to least interesting. You get sort of like what's in the upper right hand corner, and start there and work your way towards the lower left. But we talked about this in our breakout group, and I think this is something that I have struggled with in facilitation since things went virtual. But trying to do that kind of a process virtually, especially if we're limited only to Zoom, I have not found a solution for. So I would be very curious hearing about whether anyone has found some options for that particular process.
Yeah. I would say that one I would put that in my don't use pile, the urgent versus important, unless I was going to bring in like something like Mural or Jamboard or something where we could collaboratively move things. Which is, relatively easy. I've introduced Mural to people in less than 5 minutes and had it go 80 to 90% successful. So that's my first thought on that. anybody have a really different reason to start somewhere? For Bryn, it was this like idea of starting with the most urgent and important and kind of working down. Does anybody have a really different idea? Yeah, Andrea.
Hey, obviously the first intuition I had was dodge voting, because I use it a lot. But I was thinking one card that I picked and that I really like is reverse engineering. And I wonder if you could sort of like say it to the group in terms of framing the dot voting question, like if we were to reverse engineer where we want to be by the end of this workshop together, which sticky note would you vote on, or have that as part of the process? And I don't know if anyone has ever tried something like that, but
yeah, I think that's wonderful. I think that's super compelling. One of my favorite parts of reverse engineering is that you give people a temporary mind space where they've already accomplished the goals. Like you say, like, we're already there. You already feel like you're masterful facilitators. And people are like, oh, wow, that'd be cool. And then you figure out how you got there, right? And I think even that like temporary space of like, rather than feeling all this indecision, you feel like, I don't know, this thought experiment of just like, you feel really good. How did we get there? I think it's a really great framing for the narrowing. Yeah. Yeah, Erica.
So one of the things I was thinking about is using the heads up, heads down, like with a modification. And I talked about it a little bit with turning the camera on and off. So creating that establishment by like, everybody start with your camera off and turn the camera on. Or in this instance, from a priorities perspective, I'd actually probably say everyone start with your camera on, because we talked about using the, I think versus I know as well. I think that's a really solid place to start from an adult learning standpoint. But if everyone starts with their camera on and then it's like, turn off your camera if this is in the think versus know, or I mean, I know versus I wonder, not I think versus I know, sorry. But if this is your wonder and the whole screen goes black, you know where to start. Like you have a visual immediate moment and everyone else knows where to start and knows why you're starting there. And we recognize that we're all sort of in the same boat and maybe have no oars, right? Like, so we're like, cool, this is good. But I think sometimes in those moments when you start with what may for a participant, even if you're not being borderline ambiguous with where you're going, what may for a participant feel like there isn't a plan is when there's a visual reinforcement of that plan. And so having that, especially in Zoom, it's way easier than the heads down, heads up, or a hands down, heads up thing, because you're technically not looking, right? But using sort of a hybrid of that, where people do see, it does take out the anonymity, that one, anemone. So it takes out the capacity for being anonymous, we'll go that right.
Yep.
But it also creates this reinforcement of, it appears that none of us have any idea what this is. We may not have all been in the I wonder category, but now we realize like might be worth it. So that
I love that
reinforcement I think is really helpful.
Something I love that idea, Erica, and I think that is a cool way to get group buy-in of like, this is why I'm starting here, is because this is where we all wanted to start, or this is where it's obvious we have the biggest gap. Something else I'll throw out just as we're coming in on time is all of the three kind of examples. I would say like really prioritize the participants and what they would need or want really most to get into. And I want to throw out something that I think is absolutely essential in emergent facilitation, which is you can make decisions for you. So you could be like, I want to start with this one because this one has them working in small groups, and them working in small groups gives me more time to figure out what the next piece is, right? Or I'm going to start with like, oh, hey, I saw you guys wanted to talk about co-facilitation. I kind of have a stock activity on co-facilitation. And so we're going to do that one because if we do that one next, we're going to get to lunch, and lunch gives me longer to plan and like it allows me to be more creative. And so like, it's not to ignore, you still want to like get all of that data from participants, but also to know that like sometimes making choices that give you more time or that like allow you to be like, okay, I just did 2 hours of emergent facilitation. I need to go on autopilot just so my brain doesn't fizzle out for the rest of the afternoon. You can make choices based on that as well. So that's something I just want to throw out, that like, that's a really, that's something that I've used a lot. And with your facilitator cards, like any activity that is not individual or large group, right? Any activity that is pairs or small group is an activity where you get 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 20 minutes. And so sometimes strategically placing those activities so that you have more time, that's for me, like been a huge part of what allows me to get emergent facilitations off the ground. Sometimes I will have groups, like I've done something as simple as like, give me a bunch of topics you want to explore. Cool. I need to figure out where to start. I'm just going to put a couple on the ground. Like when I was in person, I was like, I'm going to put a couple on the ground. I just want you to sit by the one that you most want to explore. And I just want you to talk about, why did you pick that topic? Why is that the thing you're excited to get into? I never used that data. I never went back to those conversations. That was exclusively for them to have something to talk about for like 10 minutes while I figured out where to start, where to go, how to go somewhere next. And what was amazing is a lot of people were like, that was so valuable to just have time to talk to each other, because so rarely do we actually get the like some spaciousness to talk to each other. And so depending on the group and how like game for that they are, that can actually be a really valuable time for them as well. But mostly it was because I needed that time, and figuring out how to thread that needle, I think, is really important. Okay, we have 2 minutes left in our first hour. And I wanted to do a different type of wrap up today. So I'm using what's the MVP as kind of my framing for the wrap up. So let's imagine that somebody asks you later, hey, what were you doing this morning or this afternoon or this evening? This is not helpful. What'd you do today? And then you say, I went to an emergent facilitation workshop. And they say, oh, what'd you learn? And you get to tell them 2 things. You get to tell them for a minute. Okay. Put in the chat. I would love you to type into the chat. What would you tell that person? Like, what was a takeaway? What's something that you learned? What's something you realized? What's something you felt? But what would you share with that person who was like, oh, how was it? Or what'd you learn? That's what I'd love you to put in the chat to help us wrap up. Finish up the thought you're working on. Hit send. Beautiful. I'm going to read through these in a bit. Just to bring us into a kind of final wrap up here at the end, if you're not sticking around for the second hour, one thing I just want to say, because I know some people have to sign off like this moment, is please look for an email later. I will send you a feedback form, and I would love if you filled it out for me, just on your experience today. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that, ooh, that was so interesting. People got in the middle of my chats. So the second thing is that we have another Brain Jam coming up next month at this time. We are going to do a facilitator potluck, which basically means like come and bring something that you've learned in the last year, something you want to show off, something you want to facilitate with us, and you'll be able to share it with a bunch of people who also want to do that. So that's going to be our facilitator potluck. The RSVP is in the chat. I will also send that in the follow-up email. If you have to sign off now, I would just invite you to unmute, give us a wave, say goodbye. And if you're sticking around for the second hour, we'll start that in just a moment. But thanks all for coming.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Meg.
Peace.
Yes. Thank you.
I have to drop off, but I have a question for you, Meg.
Okay.
What you were doing before, where you had the visuals and you were typing, what were you using to do that? Yeah.
Yeah. This is OBS.
Okay, it is. Yeah.
With Google Slides green screened. So this portion of the Google slide is green screened out in OBS, and this part is not. And that's how this works.